This is Show Money, the only show exclusively dedicated to the business of mixed martial arts. I'm Paul Gift, and I almost recorded the whole show without pressing record. Thankfully, Jason Cruz, our lawyer here, caught it uh, when we were first starting out, so we didn't kill like an hour, hour and a half of our lives. But I'm Paul Gift, the economist. With me, as always, Jason Cruz, our lawyer, and John Nash, the man who knows everyone and everything in MMA. We got two topics today. They are the ESPN Plus deal with the UFC and Leslie Smith and her ongoing issue with the UFC, and now that has been escalated to the NLRB. And so, if you haven't heard, the UFC announced that they signed a deal with ESPN Plus starting January of next year for 5 years, $750 million, giving 15 events per year to air on the new OTT platform, ESPN Plus, which was great timing given that all these OTT platforms are popping up and propagating everywhere, and expecting to lose money in the first few years and trying to come up with something to attract viewers to their platform. Jason, when you first heard this news, what was the first thing that went through your mind? What were your initial thoughts?
I thought it was actually a very good deal for both sides, for both ESPN Plus and UFC. For ESPN Plus, it kind of bolsters their content library. They already have some boxing, but it's more the UFC is more of a in terms of the what ESPN Plus has to offer, kind of a second tier ancillary complement to their existing the full menu of stuff that ESPN Plus will offer. But it's still good for the UFC. I think the key thing here that struck to that highlighted the high point. It's late, guys. That stood out was that essentially ESPN is paying for $10 million per live event. If they're paying $150 million per year, 10 events per year from ESPN, it's essentially $10 million per live event. Of course, there is other content they're going to be showing. They're going to show Dana White's Contender Series, which is apparently going on for the third season. Other types of content like that that will help showcase the UFC. So definitely that $10 million figure will be good in the television rights fee negotiations, however they may use it. I think it definitely helps them. And aside from that, I think you get the notion that ESPN, of course, will be covering more of the UFC on its network, ESPN and ESPN2, although there is not going to be any live events as of yet. You get the inference that they will definitely be highlighting the UFC much more in interviews with more accessibility with the UFC fighters, things of that nature. So from that perspective, from that business side, I think it's a great business deal. Obviously, there's other things we'll talk about down the road that may not be as good specifically for the fighters. But John, what do you think about the deal?
Well, it's what William Morris Endeavor, I should say, now what Endeavor wanted. We knew that they wanted a big TV deal. The rumor's already out that Fox has offered them over $200 million per year to renew for Fox. So this gives them another platform to add on to that. So they seem to be hitting the figure they were shooting for. Maybe not as much as was leaked to Sports Business Journal at 400 to 450 million, but they're definitely in the what I heard from other sources that they wanted around 300 million is what they're really shooting for. And it looks like they're going to surpass that. They're going to get over 300 million. I don't think none of us should be really that surprised. I think all of us thought there was a good chance that they get a streaming service as one of the second channel. I thought it might be Amazon based on Amazon's actions. So I guess ESPN surprised me a little bit. I didn't know they're going to go that far in on their app, considering that they're making cuts. But a lot of people are going ahead with the apps. The streaming service seems to be the future. Money was drying up on the live sports, and now it's back again. But on the streaming services, is evidenced by Eddie Hearn. So. I'm not surprised. UFC's got to be very happy. They've just this deal matches their current Fox deal, and now whatever they get on the the new Fox deal goes straight in their pockets. So what's your take, Paul?
Do you think it's a given that Fox is the next one?
I don't think it's a given. I'm sure they're negotiating with two parties right now, but I have my suspicions that Fox will be the one. I think it's a more valuable property for Fox than for, I think the other one rumored is NBC.
NBC, yeah.
Yeah, I think Fox would be the one as well. But yeah, it sounds like the 200 million that Fox had initially offered is still on the table, and even if they go up a little bit, that would be over 300 million for their rights fee deal, which is good. I think the one question maybe posed to you two is, it's a 5-year deal. Do you think that it's shorter than many of the other rights fees deals that we're seeing? Do you think that the short nature of it is good or bad for the UFC?
Want to take that, John?
No, but I will. I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I guess for UFC, I bet you they would like a longer term deal. I mean, I guess is what's your predictions? What's going to happen with streaming services? If you think the streaming services are really going to take off and the revenue is going to be there and they're going to start, then it's good to be only 5 years, because 5 years down the road you can get a much bigger deal from someone else. If you're thinking that that NBC, or I mean, if you're thinking that that this is as good as it gets, and it's going to level off mighty quick, then 5 years is probably not a good deal, especially if a lot of streaming services go out and it's becomes a monopoly that only one or two are really functioning on a profit margin. So it's a risk. I don't know what's going to happen with this. We're entering a whole new world of media, and media's found a tremendous way to be concentrated very quickly now compared to the past. So we'll see what happens, if it stays that way or not. Yeah.
The 5 years doesn't surprise me very much, just given that it's this new technology. And I think I'm guessing on the part of both sides that they kind of just want to, relative to other things, a shorter deal just to see how this goes, for UFC to see how this new technology goes and how people are attracted to it. And for ESPN, what they would probably want right now is just that push of MMA followers who will sign up. Come, as we were talking about off air, when were you going to sign up? It was like December, January. we'll sign up when this thing kicks in. The 5 years doesn't necessarily surprise me, but supposedly there are, what's left, I guess this is from, what was this from? Bloomberg, I think, is what's left is 12 pay-per-view prelims that they're selling separately, and 15 other events. So do you see room for anyone other than Fox? And what do you think? Where do you think Fight Pass comes into play in any of this?
Well, Jeremy Potter had a piece about Fight Pass. I don't know if you guys saw that. Not a piece, but he did a tweet storm, a tweet thread, whatever the Twitter term is, whatever that terminology is. Did you guys see that? He explains yeah, I'm going to call it. It was an in-depth reporting, which he put
on Twitter.
Yeah, on Twitter. But if you guys hadn't seen it, he talked about what he talked to some people with the plan for Fight Pass is. Apparently, a lot of the stuff is going to go to ESPN Plus, and Fight Pass will be the home to non-UFC stuff and the library. But the deal is, if you pay $10, what'll happen if you pay the $5 to get the ESPN app, and you pay an additional $5, then you get the Fight Pass membership. So it's for the same $10 you get both now. That's what he was saying. He was being told.
So it's what's going on with MLB Plus right now.
Yeah, I had read something else too, that so they're going to offer 12 though. There goes the whole rumor, that the whole theory that they might cut down on the number of pay-per-views. Because I heard somewhere else that they're offering 24 shows, but so it's not. I've not heard like rumor. I mean, in a report somewhere that it was 24 shows they were shopping around. But if it's 12 pay-per-view prelims, well, we still got the 12 damn pay-per-views from them.
So I initially thought that Fight Pass was going to go by the wayside, but then I forgot that there's a library. And then also there is the international subscribers that are not included in this ESPN UFC deal. So there is still room for Fight Pass, but I don't know how much it decreases. Definitely, if you're given a deal for being ESPN Plus and a Fight Pass subscriber, then you might see subscriptions to Fight Pass not fall off as precipitously as it could be.
And there's still going to be these, I'd imagine, these international shows that, whatever LA time come on at 10 in the morning, or and I'd imagine ESPN would want to be paying $10 million for one of those. I'm guessing. But
must have written in that a couple shows are at odd hours. Like 3 of the shows will be at whatever local time, and you're stuck with that's part of the. Who knows?
It could be in there. I'm doubtful. I'm skeptical. Yeah. And there was something, I don't remember what outlet it was. I think it was the LA Times one, where they were talking about Fight Pass events and pay-per-view events being extra. We all know about pay-per-view events, but it sounded like there was still going to be Fight Pass events going on. But so how do you think this connects with their plan? We know that when Endeavor bought them, that they're all about cutting costs, accelerating growth, that sort of thing. Do you think that Ari Emanuel is living up to what he was supposed to do here?
Yeah, it's on the TV front, the broadcast. It seems it's the pay-per-view side that they're obviously got to be worried about, because I'm sure they had expectations to be doing much more pay-per-view sales, but because that's such a huge chunk of their business. But I got to go back to the pay-per-view. I can't believe they're going to do 12 pay-per-views, because you look at the numbers at the bottom barrel of the pay-per-views, the TV deals they're signing pay more than those low-end pay-per-views do now. Right. A pay-per-view that sells 150,000 is collecting $4 million revenue on the pay-per-view side. You're looking at 150 million for 15 shows. Okay, it's not all for the shows. The other one's going to be like 200 and some. So you're looking at anywhere from $6 to $10 million per show broadcast, probably in that ballpark. That's better than a crappy paper. Why keep the crappy pay-per-views? That's man, you got me pissed about these pay-per-views that they're not going to cut them out.
I feel like if they stack the card with a DJ main event and a Nico Montano co-main event, that they could beat 150,000. I really do.
Yeah, 175,000. The floor now is about 200,000. You got at least you have to do, and so I just don't see why drop the bottom 6 bad selling pay-per-views every year and stack the ones that you're going to have. Like the one they're supposedly going to do in LA, which I'm going to send in my credential. I'm going to send in my credential request. If they're really going to do GSP versus Diaz and Cody Garbrandt versus Dillashaw and all that on one pay-per-view card, I should see that.
And that's in case I'm going to get hate tweets, I was totally kidding about the DJ Nico Montano thing. That would not hit 175.
Well, if you had CM Punk, I would have. If you had CM Punk on that card, well, that would have been fine.
I'm excited for that card. I don't care what people say. I'm excited to see CM Punk go. What do you think ESPN? I don't know. No, I don't want to go there. I was wondering, like you, about Amazon versus some other streaming service, and they went with ESPN. And it makes me wonder, even if Amazon offered more, possibly, and they still chose ESPN, because one of the things you get is all this complementary auxiliary coverage, and ESPN, it seems, helps move you more into the mainstream, since they now have an incentive to promote something that's on their platforms a lot more than they used to do. What do you guys think that means in terms of the mainstreamification of our sport?
I think that there's definitely a need, and I think that's why WME purchased, one of the reasons why they purchased the UFC is because they probably thought they could turn it into more of a mainstream deal. They want to include more of their athletes in some of these sponsorship deals that they're trying to broker. And like you said, Amazon is making buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets of money. And like no one is dropping an eyelash when they say Amazon Prime is going to be boosted up from $99 to $119. No one ran through the streets protesting that. And coupled with the fact that Amazon just paid a whole big load of money for NFL rights, and so they definitely are in that space. But from that perspective, like you said, Paul, the ability to be carried on ESPN and to have that visibility with ESPN, and for the ESPN to co-promote, for their fighters to do the car wash on ESPN, that would be much more helpful in terms of that than being on Amazon and kind of being on an island and it's still having to use their own resources to promote.
Yeah, it's I mean, one thing about it's interesting about Amazon, they're going to raise their price from $99 to $119, whatever. Talk about your snip test. I mean, you know, they're handing it to us. They're like, well, let's really run this, you know.
That's John Nash going all economics on your ass, guys. Just in case
people, everybody who watches the show should know that because we've talked about that very subject at least a half a dozen times. And
horizontal merger guidelines. What happens when you merge? Might you have an incentive to raise price? It's a snip test. John Nash brought it to you.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, people are talking about, oh, Amazon's a monopoly. No, they're not. Well, holy crap. Now we can find out how much control of the market they have. But anyways, back to them. There's also, here's a rumor I heard, and I have no way to verify this, but I'm just going to go with the rumor. Let me just put out that it is just a rumor. I didn't get it from a direct source or anything, but there was a rumor that PFL, that Amazon offered to air them for the amount told me sounds ridiculously high, like 40 million, and they turned it down, or no, sorry, not 40, 10 million, and they turned it down because they expected to make tens of million more, which sounds absurd to me. If they got offered 10 million, you grab that because that basically finances your that's your payroll right there for the whole season. So, but that was the rumor that Amazon was going to put on World Series of Fighting or PFL. And so they dipped their toes into it.
What happened? Wait, they turned it down?
Again, it's a rumor, so no one take this as a verifiable fact. It's just a rumor that they made the offer and that the guys at PFL thought they could get more.
Yeah, so, you have to reveal your source on that one, John.
Again, the source is not a direct source. So I shouldn't even have brought it up. I was going to use an alias. I'm so tired I fucked up and forgot to use a bogus promotion name or leave that blank. So again, I said it, people. But anyways, it's not. But it gives me a suggestion that people at least are thinking that Amazon's thinking about getting in this. Start doing these type of products. ESPN wise, yeah, the shoulder programming is a big deal for them. That helps a lot. I'm just again surprised they're dishing out that kind of money. I'm really curious how much they're actually paying for top ranks boxing, because part of me says remember they signed a new deal this year to put a lot of events from Top Rank on the app. Part of me wonders if they're paying a lot more than we thought for those fights. That they're actually paying because they're that Aram and those guys wanted them on regular broadcast, and they're actually paying a higher amount because they want to put them on the app. And if you look at what, like, again, Eddie Hearn's getting 125 million from this DAZN streaming service. There seems to be a lot of money being thrown around in streaming services right now. Yeah. We should put this show on a streaming service. That's what I'm saying.
offer it to Netflix, right? Buying everything or whatever.
People watch Barstools for that sake.
This is off topic, but do you think Al Heyman deserves a little bit of credit for that after his however many hundreds of billions flushed down the toilet, and then this started happening?
I think he does. What's amazing is his whole plan was to get a big TV deal to finance boxing, bigger than like HBO and Showtime together paying. And now a lot of his boxers are going to get it, but probably signed with Eddie Hearn instead of him. Right. So that's ironic. That's pretty amazing.
It is amazing what's happening these things. Okay, so we've got a little bit. Probably going to be some time till we hear about the next deal, I think. But time is in a few months. I would guess. But what do you think? What do you think at the end of the day? By the time 2019 comes around.
Who they're going with the TV rights deal, or what do you think?
TV rights. What do you think? U.S. TV rights. What do you think it's going to be?
I think they stay with Fox. I just see it from the standpoint that FS1 needs them, or they need FS1. That's kind of all that I'm going with. I don't see it. I just see it as I don't think NBC is going to be a viable partner there, and I never really thought Turner was in on it at all. So there you go.
John, how about you?
I go with Fox too. A little over 200 million would be my guess. Basically, the number that was said earlier, reported earlier by people, rumored. That means that even on a bad year, like a down pay-per-view year, that they're probably their bottom line revenue that year is going to be 700 million. So you're looking 700 million, and on really good pay-per-view years, 900 million to $1 billion. So they're hitting close to hitting their targets that they were projecting that they wanted to hit if they get that.
Yeah.
So that's, and and it's all profit. There's nothing, that's just they cover their costs are covered. That's all going to their pockets.
Plus all the growth you probably or might be getting out of international. You guys probably have the right answer, but I'm gonna play the field. Something other than that. I don't know. Last time we talked about this, my latest prediction before today was, I think that was like almost a year ago or a few months ago, but it was Fox, ESPN, and some other streaming service like Amazon. Now we've got the streaming service already. I think Fox stays in, but I don't know. I'm going to throw the wild card of something else in there, like maybe a little bit of NBC or Amazon, but who knows at the end of the day.
Netflix.
That would be awesome.
Or Hulu. How about that? Or YouTube Red.
Some dark horse. You never know. You never know, but interesting things are happening on the TV business side of the sport, which moves us into Leslie Smith and what happened with her. And John, you want to intro people on this?
No, but I will, I guess. You really get them. Like I said, I did already 3 podcasts today, so that's my 4th. So
maybe you'll let something slip that on the side from your secret source.
Anyways, Leslie Smith, as everybody knows, she had her last fight under contract with the UFC a couple weeks ago. Her Aspen lad was supposed to be her opponent. Her opponent missed weight. Leslie Smith turned down the fight originally. She had some negotiations with the UFC. She first she asked for more, wanted to renegotiate her contract, make more money. They apparently didn't want her. She then offered, to stick around for one more fight. They didn't like that. They basically paid her to show her win money and said, "Hey, thanks. Our deals, we honored your contract. You're done." And they let her go. So she is claiming that she was actually released by the UFC because of her union activity, that this was a form of punishment. And so she has filed what's called a charge with the National Labor Relations Board. It's not a lawsuit. It's not a complaint. It's a charge. I have to be specific because the people explaining it to me got really upset when I got this wrong every time. It's called a charge. What the charge does is it accuses the UFC of violating Section 8, which is a violation of Section 7 of the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act. And what that is that if you're an employee, you are protected to go around and work trying to organize a union or collectively working with your fellow employees to better your workplace. It's a violation for your employee to take action against that. So that's what she's accusing. She's going to want some sort of remedy. So what happens now is that the NLRB is going to get it, and they have to determine if they need to start an investigation or not. I'm sure there will be an investigation no matter what. And if there's an investigation and they see that they think there's enough evidence, then they go into what's called a complaint. Now that's the actual complaint starts, and it starts a whole brouhaha. Truthfully, looking at it, I think she has no chance whatsoever of winning
because
her charge, because she finished her fight. That was the last fight under deal. It's going to be almost impossible to portray that as as a sort of punishment for her. Even though we can all sit there and go, it's obvious they wanted to get rid of her. She finished all the fights on her contract, and she really, what's her standing? She was no longer an employee at that point. Even if she's an employee, she's no longer under contract with that promotion. But that's not what she's going after. That's not what this suit is about. I don't think her and Lucas Middlebrook, her attorney, I don't think they really care about the remedy. I mean, I think they do care about the remedy. They'd love to get a remedy in her favor. But what they're really looking for is they want the NLRB to make a ruling on what her status is. Is she an employee, and therefore are all the UFC fighters employees, or are they independent contractors? So that's the brief. Well, I guess not so brief. Sorry, I'm not good at brevity. But that's the summary of what's going on. I gave my opinion of what I think, up to that point's going to happen. I guess we should really go to Jason, the only guy with any legal background here.
Hey,
went to school for this.
I used to be a litigation consultant. Anyway,
consultant, yeah, but you didn't get a law degree. You're not a lawyer.
You didn't have to do what I do. But I mean, just a couple of things from the charge that I thought was interesting is that she let if she let the UFC know that she was going to wear a Project Spearhead mouthpiece, which probably did not make the UFC happy about. So she was going to wear that for the fight. She turned down as John talked about, she turned down the fight. She wanted to negotiate, from what I understand, a two-fight. She wanted 2 more fights on her deal if she took the fight at Atlantic City. That's what I understand. But the UFC said, no, thank you, you're done. Prior to that, she had tried to set up a meeting with Reed Smith at the UFC. The charge letter, it was a little vague as to what transpired, but then that meeting never happened. Then she was supposed to meet Hunter Campbell, who is the chief legal officer, and they could not meet up as well. So there are a lot of stories untold here, and the UFC has not been has not put out anything as of yet related to Leslie Smith's filing of this NLRB charge. Another thing about this, which makes this all the more a little bit interesting, is if you were the UFC and you wanted to get rid of Leslie Smith, why wouldn't you just pay her show money and just say, this is the last end of this is the end of your contract. Let's think about it. We'll get back to you, and then let her go at some other time down the road. You pay the show and win money. It looks like it looks like you're trying to do something else. And then, from what I understand from the charge letter, is that they then immediately took her off the USADA list, and they told her, they waived their right to match, dates, which is like 90 days, so she could freely join. So all of that looks really weird. That's the legal term. It's just really weird that you just have these facts that are out there that don't look like the others. And what I'm trying to say is that, like, with every other fight where someone misses weight or something happens, they don't get paid their win money. It's really out of the ordinary, unless there's extenuating circumstances. And we all know Leslie Smith's deal here. As far as what's going to happen next, Morgan Lewis Brocchius, I believe, is a law firm, and they specialize in labor and employment. And from what I understand, they were picked as the #1 law firm for labor and employment in 2017. So they're #1. I mean, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. But I think John hit the nail right on the head. There are a lot of extrinsic facts, but the most important fact, and this is what UFC will say, is she fought out the terms of her contract, and that is all.
But the question is, picked by an outlet that's more aligned with workers or more aligned with businesses for the best labor law firm in 2017?
Oh, it's Law 360. I don't know. I don't have a subscription to them. They're under a paywall. So. But I always I don't know. You know these law firms. They pay to get #1 whatever. I get emails once a day about being the best lawyer in something, and I always turn them down. I just kid, because I'm sure that Morgan Lewis is great. He don't sue me.
I'm gonna add on to what John said. And I don't know. I mean, Jason is probably the most NLRB expert of the three of us. If we can call any of us an NLRB expert, we need Lucas Middlebrook here, right? But to add on to what John said, what's that?
I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn or whatever. So
Holiday Inn Express, my friend.
Oh well, shit. That's my problem right there.
You chose the wrong one. But to add on to what John said, for another reason to possibly be skeptical is this goes to the regional director and they investigate. And if they agree that something might be there, they issue a complaint, and then it goes in front of an administrative law judge. And after the administrative law judge, I believe that can be appealed to the 5-member board of the NLRB, which as of last month now has 3 Trump-appointed Republicans just within the last year or two on it, and 2 Democrats. And so it just makes you wonder. It makes you, if Trump is still in office by the time this gets to the board, it makes you wonder if that connection might play a role in their determination on the Smith case, and if a determination of employee status is involved there as well. Don't you think? Doesn't it make you wonder in the back of your head a little bit? I don't know.
I mean, if you're paying attention, I mean, if people are paying attention to news, that a lot of like union type groups, they're rescinding their complaints to the NLRB right now because they do not want to go in front of this board. So there's been a few cases, but people are already convinced that this board is anti-union, anti-labor. So
and throw in now that this is a business with Dana White pitching for Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention.
Yeah, that doesn't help either. So, and then the other thing to go with this too is that with the charge and everything is that first the process is going to take a while. If the UFC, let's say, even if it goes through into complaint investigation and all that stuff, and God, now I can't remember the order, but it goes through and it gets to the board. They make a judgment or whatever. They start making a judgment. There's a whole hearing they have to have. Well, then there's an appeals process. It could easily go from, a quick decision could be 2 years. Well, there'll be a quick remedy decision coming up right now. They want to push that. And for Leslie Smith, I don't know if you saw that, they filed, and the NROB said they're gonna maybe a quick turnaround on the
injunction.
On the remedy.
They might file an injunction.
Yeah, the injunction. And I've talked to a lot of labor guys, organizers and stuff, and they think the most likely, that could very well just be a letter that the UFC has to mail a letter to all the fighters saying, hey, we cannot take these kind of actions. You're protected in your right to organize and stuff like that. It could be something that simple, or they could post it on the internet. They might have to publicly post it, that you're protected on that. That does not mean they'll make a quick decision on the employee status. So with appeals and stuff, this could easily stretch on 5 years, which could mean another administration, which could be a whole different board. But again, it doesn't mean it'd be quick. The thing though that Jason brought up is, why would the UFC do this? I guess one thing is, obviously, since Middlebrook was threatening this, they had to know that this was a possibility. The action they took. Part of me wonders if they are just that confident in independent contractor status that they're not worried, or they're not worried about giving up employee status in the future either. That's not a concern either. That's the only thing that comes to my mind, because this action basically was asking for the NLRB to step in and take a look at it, and they apparently didn't care that they were gonna.
Yeah, and playing off of what you said, one of my takes on it, and again, it could be totally wrong, but one of my takes on it is that it kind of signals to me that the UFC takes this a lot more seriously than they do the antitrust case. Because my view on the antitrust case is that the UFC is likely going to win by summary judgment. That's my guess right now. But that they don't mind. They take this seriously, but the possible deterrent effect of showing what happens to Leslie Smith, who the key organizer of this thing, is something that they wanted to do. That's sort of what. And then, but then your take, of course, is maybe they're not even worried about the outcome. But I think this signals that they take it a lot more seriously than they do that, Rob Macy's thing of let's be an association and keep our antitrust options open. I don't think they care about that at all, except for the money that they have to spend to defend themselves. To me, this suggests that they take this possible unionization a lot more seriously, and they wanted to publicly get rid of Leslie Smith and make sure that everybody knew it. That's my side.
It's really it's really interesting to think what actually would happen with the previous ownership, the Fertittas. How would they have dealt with this situation? Because it does definitely think you have to think that this was strategically done or just strategically bungled. one way or the other. And I definitely think that the UFC's lawyers were already looking into this situation when Leslie Smith already last year, or was it at the fighter retreat where she spoke up when Kobe Bryant was talking about the benefits of the players' union in the NBA, and then Project Spearhead and all this other stuff. I'm sure they had people working on it, teed it up to look at what their options were. So it just took me by surprise that it was so blatant to just kind of just offer like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't think if you think about it, they can't be worried about I mean, what are they worried about with Project Spearhead, though? That they become employees? Okay, that costs a little bit more. That they can form. The union won't be able to do much. I mean, their best weapon as a union is actually the antitrust. If the antitrust wins something, the union now has a leverage. Union can use that to force on the. You could say, hey, recognize us as a union and sign a collective bargaining agreement, or we're just going to sue your ass again. They're not going to. If the antitrust doesn't have any chance, that I don't see that. They're not going to have much leverage as a union itself, because they're going to be extremely weak union. I mean, the NFLPA is famously notorious for being a weak athletic union, and the big reason is because so many players make less and they have short careers. The average career in the NFL is only 3.5 years. The average UFC fighter's career is a year. Any sort of work stoppage, any sort of leverage is basically the end of a half your roster's career. They're gonna agree to basically anything whatever offer is made by the promoter. So that's the problem. That's the other problem. So I mean, I don't know about you don't have no faith in the antitrust, but the part that gives me faith in it is that James Quinn seems to want to stick his nose in it and seems to have faith in it. So that makes me think that he thinks there's something there.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing the expert reports, and it just doesn't look good to me. But I mean,
it doesn't look good to me. It doesn't look good. I read them too, and I just
they're hanging their hat on wage share, but we're not. But in terms of, and I agree that it might be one of the weaker unions, but it's still bilateral negotiation versus one buyer and 500 sellers, and that's something that they just don't have right now. That idea, and also once you get that union in place, you never know what comes from it, just like with all the other sports, right? They've gradually built it up to where it is today in terms of compensation.
But again, all the other ones built it up through competition between the teams. Not all of it. Which one? I mean, Major League Soccer is the only one that didn't build up their competition. Yeah, and Major League Soccer pays the least, and the only reason Major League Soccer pays anything more than the UFC as a percentage share of wages is because the top guys make money because they can go to Europe or overseas to Asia. They have to compete with them.
Right, but what I'm saying is, imagine that this is where we disagree. You think that the antitrust might possibly be something. Imagine that you think the antitrust is nothing, right?
Yeah.
So you're not worried about that at all. There's the possible forming of a union happening. That's the thing that you're worried about, even if immediately it won't have that much of an effect. For you to just dismiss it, that it might be nothing, I cannot agree with that at all. You would sit there in your offices and be like, man, I don't want to possibly have to negotiate with one seller instead of 500 sellers, even if I think I have decent amount of leverage over them.
Well, again, here's the thing with the 500 sellers. It's having a union's better for the fighters than not having a union, because the problem is so much stuff has already happened. It's hard to go back and unwind it. You can't go back and get your sponsorship rights. You can't go back and the merch deals. It's hard. It's hard to unwind stuff that's happening. Usually build on with any deal. So it's going to be years and years and years before you start unwinding all the crap that you gave up years before, which would have been great if you had a union in place when they first brought it, because if you had a union in place, they'd say, hey, listen, we don't like the merch deal. We want a much bigger cut. They could have won some on that. We don't like the giving up our video game rights. We're going to stand together. We could have won something on that. The Reebok deal, USADA, all that stuff would have been big wins. But I just don't. I mean, for the UFC, what are those costs? It's sure it's a pain in the ass for them. They have to deal with the union, but is it that great a pain in the ass? And in a weird way, it's a PR win for them eventually, if in the future, because in the future, let's face it, I really have no faith that Bellator is going to be sticking around forever. They're not making any sort of headway that, people talk about. There's all these rivalries and all these competitors. Come on, you add them all together and they're what, 1/20th the size of the UFC. So I don't see that being a big threat. And so in the future, it's like, well, you know what? It's for PR to get these people off our back. Maybe it's worth to pay a little extra to pay the fighters more and to be in a union and have to pay these payrolls and stuff. Because at the end, we're still making huge sums of money. We're, a single entity monopoly. We can find somewhere else to get the money back.
I think we have a different opinion on that one, John. I don't think they would ever say, like, let's just allow a union to form and it's a PR win.
Again, the union's a pain in the ass, but I'm sure they don't want a union. I'm sure that's not they don't want a union, but I don't know if they look at it like, first of all, they'd have to get a union. Employee status is step one, right? They like the control they have. They like the way it is, but I don't know if a union is such a game changer to their business model. I just don't see it. It's like the Ali Act. The Ali Act would be a game changer if you had any ways to enforce it. The problem is the Ali Act, all that's going to happen is the UFC is going to get in a deal with one of the sanctioning organizations and basically have, okay, here's our UFC title. It's run by someone else, but it's our title. Everything's based almost exactly what it was before.
Yeah, in theory, it could be a huge threat.
In theory, it'd be a massive threat. But I don't, unless, and here's the other problem, again, the association front, the Ali Act, unless you had a big association with a lot of fighters sticking together to make sure it's enforced. But we see no sort of movement in that direction where the fighters could stick together and do that. So I think it's the problem with both. Both are slightly better than what we have, but I don't see either one really threatening the UFC's, position, their business model.
Jason, why don't you jump in here?
Well, I think I see John's point. I see John's point, but it seems as though that it's hard for whatever reason, it's hard for the fighters to decide on how to organize. And, everyone seems to be behind, not everybody, but a lot of people seem to think that Project Spearhead was the best thing going. However, I think the problem with these organizing employees or contractors or whatever is that it's hard to come to a collaboration. I mean, even if you have an association or union get together in the UFC, there will still be issues with that. You'll still have to pay. There'll be the administrative things of paying dues, having to vote officers in, coming up with decisions. Those are still intrinsically hard. But I think it's definitely better than what they have right now. How does it affect the UFC's business model to allow something like that? It's like John said, it would be a PR move, but they will probably just weigh it up against how much they have to pay in legal fees and how much they have to pay in legal fees to fight this, or how much fighter discontent there is. And the problem is, especially in like the UFC, is that the top fighters make so much that it's really hard for them to care about the bottom fighters. That's in essence one of the problems with that. I'm not sure how that could be rectified, and maybe Leslie Smith had a good idea with Project Spearhead if she could get enough people to do it.
The problem with any sort of fighters thing is what you saw. The reason the actors could form SAG is because the guys at the bottom and the guys at the top had a mutual interest together. The guys at the bottom wanted minimums and protections and all this stuff. The guys at the top wanted to get rid of these contracts that were holding them in so long, so that they could, they could try the studio system together. They could actually both get something for them. The least happy guys, and believe me, from talking to a lot of fighters and stuff, the least happy guys are the guys at the top. They're the guys that sit around thinking they're way underpaid. But there's no solution for them. There really isn't. There's no the the solution is the guys that are maybe 1 or 2 tiers down from the top. Maybe, you know, a easier free agent market helps them because they can be like Rory McDonald, and occasionally someone might make it over to Bellator and make more money. But that's just a few guys. The guys at the very top know that the only place where they can get a pay-per-view type money is the UFC. So they're stuck here at the UFC, which is, you know, they're making much more money than any other fighter, but you know, they're making just a fraction of what their, you know, their marginal revenue production is. GSP is not getting anywhere close to his real value, and there's nowhere he can go to get any close to it because the whole system's set up that way. So there's nothing the guys at the bottom can really offer them. I mean, you know, what is GSP going to gain about with a full blown union? Okay, yeah, maybe we can, you know, we have better drug testing, USADA. We have some saying that. But that's kind of it. You know, a GSP wants, how are you going to give me 5 to 10 more million?
Yeah, and interesting enough, John doesn't know about. He knows I'm working on something, but he doesn't know the details of it. But I'm working on something that directly relates to what he just said, and I'm working on the results right now. So we might actually have some numbers on that coming up. But the only other thing that I'll throw in, I mean, I agree. I'm skeptical at the end of the day on the whole unionization thing. But the area where I would think that there is a potential threat, let's assume they are organized. Let's assume the union forms, and if you can effectively do a strike, then what you've got is if you do a 2-month strike. Think about the money that you're taking away from that promotion of the UFC. Think about the effect on them, where most fighters fight maybe less than 2 times a year. It's barely setting them back, and a lot of them are used to being injured and not getting that next paycheck right away. And so there is a little. And again, I'm not saying it's a lot of leverage, and I wouldn't expect anything near what a lot of the other sports have, at least initially. But but there is that effect that when you sit out 2 months. In terms of the average time that you fight, it doesn't affect you that much. Compared to the UFC, that's 1/6 of a year of business that they're missing. So it's just something to consider.
That's worth considering, but here I'm going to lay it up to you guys. And I'm for unions. I'm a very strong pro-union guy. My problem is with people, I think, oversell a UFC unions. That kind of frustrates me when people say, oh, we're going to get revenue sharing. You're never going to get revenue sharing. Was what the owners offered the players because they got sick of the salaries rising too high. And they needed some way to cap it. And so they're the ones that gave up revenue sharing. It was never, it's not something you strike for and get. That's something the owners give you. The problem with the UFC union, and there's a lot of good stuff they can do. There's, you know, read What Do Unions Do? The book explains what's the public, the monopoly face and the public face unions, the public voice unions, the 2 different versions what unions do. The monopoly face can be very weak for UFC fighters because here's what's going to happen. And I'm not going to say 100% what's going to happen. But you're going to have a strike, and you have all these fighters that make very little money. And you're going to say, this is our demands. Now, if you make too big of demands, the UFC is going to say, well, we're going to resist this because our business model is based on us making these kind of returns. So we'll let you guys strike or whatever. You know, we'll bring in scabs. We can try picking guys off to cross the line. And it might be easy to pick some guys off that are the high end because you can't really do anything to help them. So they can offer guys that are stars more to cross the line because whatever the union's going for can't really offer them, though. They can bring up minimums and offer some benefits, but that doesn't help the stars. So the stars might cross, thinking, shit, I can get a couple extra million for a fight. And then they just sign a bunch of local guys to vote the card. And the other problem is all the UFC does has to make an offer then. And then there's a vote. The union votes on it. If they offer just a little, if they offer a small increase, all the guys at the bottom are going to be ecstatic because they weren't getting anything close to that. And the guys that are not going to be happy is that, you know, the mid-tier and the upper guys that make up a small percentage of the UFC. That's why I think the UFC union will be extremely weak because it has a group of stars that have power and then a mass of guys that are replaceable, make very little money, that make up the majority of the voting block. And it's a terrible, you know, it's a terrible setup to run a union that way. It's not like SAG has different because SAG has a guild structure and they built it over years. So you think it could be like SAG, but it can't be like SAG because they can't offer something for everybody, which SAG can do that. And that's the problem. And again, there's stuff the union can do. Form a union, and there's a lot of shit you can get that are benefits because you can stand together and stop stuff like the uniform deals, and those things are great. A union will do great wonders on that. But it's the part where everybody thinks that the union is going to go on strike and get get some sort of revenue sharing plan, and then on top of it, let's say even if magically got it, how do you decide how to split it? Then you got to come up with the whole system. And everybody's got to be happy with how you divide up the money, because it's not individually negotiated. It's parceled out at how you are on the roster.
Yeah, and this is a star-driven sport. If stars would cross, that is going to be one of the weakest unions ever, because it's a star-driven sport. You just get a few stars, you can fill it out with YouTube fighting on the card, and in the opener to the pay-per-view, and people would still buy it. But shoot, what was I going to say? I wanted to talk about you guys fighting, and then I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. I went on my little pessimistic rant. But again,
but the only point is even with all that, what you're going to see is a lot more rapid increases than what you'd see without it. That's all. That's the only point I'm making. And who knows exactly what type of union will be, but it's relative to the antitrust case, which is probably nothing. And Ali Act, which is probably nothing. It's the biggest threat out there right now, if you can call it a big threat. Biggest. I said biggest.
Yeah, well, you got to get employees. I can't consider it a big threat because you're talking 4 or 5 years down the road, no matter what. The UFC is going to appeal the employee status, so it's going to be dragged out years and years.
Yeah, sorry, biggest compensation threat too.
That's the unfortunate thing, because we have these laws that make it impossible to decide. It really screws over the fighters, because how do you get fighters excited to jump on this when then you say, well, it'll be years before this happens?
Yeah,
your career could be over by then,
and you might get fired, or you think you might get fired.
Yeah. That's the problem too. If they do not get filed to be employees, the UFC firing them is not illegal at all. You're allowed to do that to independent contractors.
Well, you just let their contract run out.
So even then, I mean, if you're trying to organize a union and you're an independent contractor, they can punish you. They can take actions against you. Because you're not protected. That's an illegal action by an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm. We've all fired independent contractors, haven't we?
As one, I've been fired several times.
Not been fired as an independent contractor. I was talking about people working on your house or something.
Oh yeah.
Like, man, that guy sucked. Get out of here.
You're out of it. You're not coming back.
I only use union labor in my place, so I don't use scabs like some people. No. I mean, again, I got to stress again. People are like, I want to make clear, I'm pro union of any sort. I'm pro association, pro whatever. It's up to the fighters what they want to organize. But I do think people oversell what it's going to do, and that just it just can't. It's an extremely weak. And the problem is, again, it's like there's the opposite is okay. The opposite's competition. Let's create competition. Well, if no one will accept competition, then you're back to square one, because you're back to the UFCs being the only boat in town.
And there you go, guys. John of this group of three is probably the most pro-union out of all of us, probably, and he's the most poo-pooey on it. And I'm probably the least pro-union out of all three of us. And I think it's their best route to attempt. Who knows what's going to happen, but to attempt. And Jason is doing who knows what.
I'm in the middle. I can take both sides. That's what I do. That's my job.
I'll say this though: if you think the antitrust is weak, if you're a union person though, if you're trying to make a union, you want that to succeed, because that's your number one weapon, by far. That's your best hope for getting anything done. If as a union is getting some sort of settlement, some sort of damages.
All right, and take it from there. Explain why.
Well, because now you have something to offer the UFC. You can't. Your striking power is extremely weak as a union. You're just like we just decided. You're going to be a very weak union on the monopoly face, as they call it, of a union. But what you can do is you say, listen, you just paid out. Let's just throw a number out there: 500 million. A large of sum that's painful for the UFC, big time painful. Well, I'm taking it from baseball and stuff. That's a reasonable number that baseball would have to pay back in the 80s with a similar revenue stream. So $500 million, you're saying you just paid out for 7 years, 500 million. If you do not want to pay that again, recognize our union and let's agree to a collective bargaining agreement. And in that case, then the UFC might agree to a revenue sharing. They're like, well, shit, we don't want to pay out again. And we like the business model we have, so let's find a spot where we're both happy in the middle, and we'll pay that out to you, and that's it.
Yeah, it's possible. And another thing off of that is if I'm completely wrong about how this antitrust case is going to go, and let's say they get through summary judgment, but it looks like it's going the fighter's way, or the judge rules and in some of the elements of summary judgment for the fighters, and someone like Zimbalist stays in with his what was it, $2 or $3 billion in damages? I don't remember what the
damages. That 800 or something, 800 million, 800 or 900 million. He said. No,
it was in the something was in the billions. It was up to 1.5. Yeah, 1.6.
1.6 was the high point.
Sorry. So if I'm completely wrong and summary judgment goes their way, the plaintiffs aren't going to win outright on summary judgment. I can't even fathom that. But some of those elements go their way, then again, you don't even need the judgment. You could just sort of have the threat of that trial and those damages hanging over their head, right? To possibly get something like you're saying.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too will be interesting, and again, this is me theorizing, but based on I don't know if you saw James Quinn's comment, the attorney comments when was it Forbes had a piece on the Leslie Smith, and they had a quote from James Quinn. James Quinn said that one of the things about it is that forming a union would give UFC immunity to the antitrust suit, which is completely, that doesn't make any sense to me, because you can't, that's retroactive. You can't go back and make people immune. But it goes to, remember the allegations that came out a year or 2 years ago against when they sent a cease and desist to MAW or whatever the hell, however we say that, MMAAA.
Yeah.
that those guys were trying to step in on the antitrust suit. Is that I think will happen if we get close? It looks like there's a chance that the antitrust suit will win. Someone's going to come out with a group of like an association, organize a group, and basically try to cut a deal with the UFC to take those people out of the suit, but recognize them. And then you're going to get that reverse auction situation where everybody's underselling each other to beat each other to the damages, or to get whatever they want out of it. The other worst thing is that they throw out class cert, but the suit goes ahead. Then you can do mass tort action, and then if you have your own group of fighters, if you've organized already a large group of fighters, you can file and steal the lawsuit, because now you're this lawyer of these guys and no longer are the current guys. So,
Jason, do you want to explain that possibility?
Multi-district litigation. It's so hard. I don't know. I was a part of it once, but
But tell me I'm wrong.
No, I don't know. You could be wrong, you could be right, but it can't. Yeah, if there's no class cert, you just pound the pavement. You take out ads like and you just find your fighters, and then you file wherever, and then at some point there'll be like a committee of plaintiffs, and then it'll be filed in one central point. Probably Nevada. I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there, and then you'll just have to coordinate at that point. It's really a complex process that is a reason why they have class action, and to prevent a glut in the court system as well. I mean, I doubt that. I doubt if a class cert is denied that you'll see people. Well, maybe I should think of it.
Suspicion, because again, this is suspicions based on the letter, is when you look at the MMAAA, they were recruiting all these fighters for their association. They're being accused of trying to challenge the lawsuit, but they also were recruiting members of the MMAAA could be UFC fighters or former UFC fighters. Okay. Why would former UFC fighters have to be a member of that, be allowed in that association? Because former UFC fighters have damages.
I mean, it would be a wild west. Wild west.
Would there still be a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and something like that? That's the idea of the class action, at least for the lawyers.
I mean,
money, right?
I mean, there are still. I have friends that are still making tons of money off of asbestos litigation. So I mean, think about that. Asbestos was like in the 70s. So I mean, what I'm trying to say is, yes, there will be people trying to file suits and things like that all over the place. I mean, if there's no class cert, of course.
Yeah,
I mean, if there is class action, then you have to go through that.
That's so. But I'm just saying, if they don't throw a class cert and someone had already if Tim Kenny, those guys have already gathered 200-300 fighter names.
Oh,
for example.
My God. Yeah, no, I mean, I just think that would be, oh, yeah. Just thinking of that just gets me,
So, I love how I'm just saying there's potential for a lot of wackiness down the road. If we cross our fingers, we could get a lot of good stories out of this still.
Jason's not giving me good clarity here because he's like, oh, I don't even want to think about that. But then he's like, at the same time, he's like, I have a lot of friends who are still making a lot of money off of this thing from the 70s or 80s. Like, tell us how we should feel here.
I mean, which question do you want me to answer? So, will there be lawsuits if there's no class cert? Probably, but I would think that a lot of them would want a lot of fighters with potential claims would want to tread lightly because they may see what happens in this lawsuit. However, there's always attorneys that'll get into somebody's ear, and you can make some money and try to make some money off of settlements and things like that. I mean, isn't that, if you want to know who are the richest lawyers, they're usually the plaintiff's lawyers. That's the truth. They're not the big firm lawyers up in the big buildings in downtown. They're the guys that deal with a lot of the mass tort injuries. So anyway, that's I don't know. I'm going on a tangent on like what my next career move will be. But yes, I definitely think that there is a possibility for a wild west of sorts if this antitrust lawsuit isn't dispensed with.
Really quick, what would the claims be? They wouldn't be antitrust claims, would they?
No, I mean, you'd have. I guess you'd have some breach of contract claims and things of that nature. I mean, the problem with the contract issues or whatnot would be that the statute of limitations is run. I mean, it's what they're trying to do with is it Nate Quarry's claim?
It's what they're doing with his identity rights claim.
Rights claim. So lawyers would have to get creative. I mean, they're known for that, but. Yeah, their causes of actions would have to. I mean, it wouldn't be necessarily antitrust.
No, it's my understanding from people I spoke to that it would be you could still file an antitrust suit. That's not a class action.
Huh? Oh, you can continue on with your antitrust. That's not a class action.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. Yes. Oh, so I guess that they would be just filing. I mean, in addition to
continuing this lawsuit.
Yeah, it would just be
not as a.
But they'd just be copying and pasting their lawsuit.
The damages are for 6
individuals.
People.
It would cut the damages a lot down for the UFC. So whoever did this, if they did a mass tort, they'd want to get as many fighters as possible to represent, because you get, instead of doing the whole group, you only get the fighters you represent, or you'd want the fighters you think would be the ones that get the biggest damages. So you'd want to represent them.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, so that's why, as you inferred, that MMA was looking for previous fighters too of the UFC.
And again, that's not my allegation. That's the allegation. The suggested. It seems to be It seems to be very inferred in that letter that was sent to them, and so.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in that I was talking to one of the attorneys and asked them when class cert comes up, is it in front of Judge Boulware or the magistrate judge? In other words, is it dispositive or not? And that person was like, I think it's in front of Judge Boulware. I think it's dispositive. So
it has to be in front of the judge. I mean, the magistrate deals with just discovery matters. So I would think that since I mean, the case turns on that, right? So I mean, you're not going to have someone else, not the sitting judge, deal with that. So
yeah, that's what I thought. But then John's like, they can continue on with it. But so yeah, I mean,
Hey, listen, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
I just play one on here. I just pretend.
Anyway, what people listening to know is most of the time when the class is not certified, the case is dead. Yeah. But there's the possibility that it could continue.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. Correct. Somehow we got on this antitrust tangent. Is there anything else we wanted to add about the Leslie Smith situation, where John and I argue some more opposite our normal position about unions?
I think that we covered it all. I just, not from a non-legal standpoint, it'll be interesting to see if Leslie Smith surfaces in another, like, I don't know, Bellator or ONE UFC, or I don't know where you would go, to be honest with you. So we'll see.
I find it interesting for Leslie Smith in a weird way is that you talk about we have all this antitrust talk, monopoly talk at the UFC. There's one ranked top 15 or something ranked fighter outside the UFC, Sarah Kaufman, who she already fought twice. Invicta, so I don't know if that's available to her.
No, that's probably not.
So it's like her options of big fights are pretty much non-existent now.
Yeah.
So yeah, she'd have to find someplace overseas or someplace to go to.
I just don't know where the market is for women's MMA 135. She could drop to 125. Maybe Bellator does more 120. Does Bellator do 125 right now? Yeah, they expanded that, didn't they? But I just don't know what the market is for it is outside the UFC. It's for women only. It's especially the UFC. Every ranked woman in her weight class right now is in the UFC. So, and
that number 9 ranked fighter, and the UFC decided they didn't need her. So
yeah.
Well, WWE it is.
Hey.
That wouldn't even happen with their quasi connection to the UFC.
Vince McMahon is willing to do business with anybody, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you feel a little bit bad. But hey, she got her show and win money to soothe her wounds. I don't know if that helps. And I'm kind of kidding when I say that. All right, guys. Anything else we want to throw in there?
Anything solidarity.
It says from the guy who is poo-pooing on everything.
Last time I said I'm very Bermuda. I still say, it's something that fighters should consider doing. It's better, much better than their current situation. My problem is it's like, the gap between this and all their pro sports is so vast. It's not going to bring people anywhere close to what people are. I guess I'm a little frustrated reading on Twitter and stuff, social media, people thinking that, you're not getting your 50% cut and all that stuff. Yeah. That's absurd.
What were we arguing about? We're in a complete agreement.
We kind of better than their current situation. It's a degree. I think it's, that, or maybe it's because I see the cup half empty and you see it half full. I guess that might be it. But
we both completely agree. It's much better than their current situation.
Yes. My whole thing was, I think people oversell it as being like it's going to be a wonder. It's a cure-all, and it's going to improve stuff, but not do anywhere close to what people expect it to do. And that's the I'm pessimist on both of us. I don't think there's a fix to it. I think that you need competition to really drive up wages, but competition seems impossible because the UFC brand's so strong that that's all anybody cares about. So if that's all anybody cares about, you can't have competition, and you're hosed on that front. You're hosed any way you go about it. I guess that's what I'm saying.
There you go, guys.
Arby's.
Why you shouldn't have been a fighter in the first place.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You chose
all three of us are in agreement on the union front now, and John just pissed off all the other promoters, all the people who said they were they were competition, all the ONE FC people, Carlos Silva over at the PFL, Shannon Knapp, who else?
Well, I will say if they win there's a big damage antitrust suit, don't form a union because you want to keep the association until you negotiate with the promotion. You don't give that up until afterwards. So if the antitrust suit, the good thing is it's going to take a while, so you won't have a union until then. But if you win the antitrust suit, don't form a union right away. You got to use that damages to negotiate your union. That's the only thing I would say.
Top level legal strategy.
That's what I'm here for. That's the type of advice I give.
And that was free.
Lawyer Cruz.
What's that?
Do you concur, Lawyer Cruz?
I have no comment. I don't want to be sued. I know I'm good.
The final comment I'll throw in there is I think that's a really big if right now, but I've been saying that over and over again. We'll see if I'm right or totally wrong.
Well, I'm
that
just
is
saying
possible.
The amount of time it's going to take to get the employee status done, the antitrust will be settled before that.
Yeah.
So we'll know ahead of time. You'll have that. You should have your eyes open to that ahead of time.
I mean, it is possible. There is a non-zero probability, just to be a little nerdy, that it could be done in class certification. So we'll see. But I don't know. I think it will in summary judgment, but that's for another day. All right. On behalf of John Nash and Jason Cruz, I'm Paul Gift, reminding you to keep doing business as usual.